Well, there you have it. Officially, a vote 50 to 48. Officially now, Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh has been voted in by the Supreme Court, making it the most conservative majority ever. I want to bring in our CBSN panel joining us now. Leslie Sanchez, I want to head to you right now. What does this mean for the Republican Party?
It's definitely, in terms of having a conservative jurist, it's certainly a very strong win. This is something that has been very important to Republicans for a variety of different reasons, and the president delivered on that, not once but twice. And it's really interesting, if you look at the tweets, what it has also done is galvanize conservative women who, on an issue that they could rally around. The Independent Women's Forum has been sending out numerous tweets talking to Senators Flake, Senators Collins, Manchin, just, basically the four undecided, to really thank them for following with due process, not looking at how politicized this was, and moving forward. But I also think credit should go to Lisa Murkowski, because nobody's talking about that. She made a very tough choice against her party line, and because she felt in her gut, and other senators as well, that there was still going to be this cloud there, and that he wasn't the right nominee at the right time. So for Republicans, it's a win, but again, that cloud will continue to remain.
Lynda Tran, where do Democrats go from here?
Democrats are going to continue to rally the troops. I mean, you've seen a lot of protests that is extraordinary and organic, with people coming in from all around the country trying to make their voices heard. And I wonder how it's going to have a chilling effect on people coming forward to share their stories of survival. In fact, we saw a video yesterday that went viral of a young woman, a 15-year-old girl, a constituent of Joe Manchin's, who came to Washington, D.C. with her mother to share her story of sexual assault. And you just have to worry about these individuals and the impact it has on them, feeling like their voices didn't matter and that their stories weren't really heard. Democrats, as we head into the election, are going to continue to grapple with that level of rage and try to channel that into a sense of empowerment about what can be done, about how change can be affected, and that is through the ballot box.
Michael, whether Judge Kavanaugh wants this recognition or not, it is somehow he has become synonymous and linked to the Me Too movement. This has also become a story about sexual assault and sexual abuse. What do we say to women out there who feel like their voices will only be silenced?
Well, I think the thing to say is that if you want to see how someone can be heard, look at how Dr. Ford was actually treated by the Senate Judiciary Committee, who listened, who gave her the opportunity to tell her story. There weren't, people yelling at her from the bench. Obviously, President Trump did not get that memo, apparently. But the Senate Judiciary Committee, it's hard to criticize how they treated Dr. Ford. If anything, they made the case, and I thought Susan Collins was very powerful on this yesterday when she called out whatever Democratic staffer who leaked the letter from Dr. Ford and forced her into the limelight. And that storyline is lost right now. People are too emotional. This is completely partisan. But I think going back, Republicans will be able to say, we have not said don't speak, but we've also said that when you speak, we still have to treat everyone fairly, And Susan Collins was a tremendous voice for that argument in her speech yesterday, which, by the way, I think was one of the best political speeches from just a pure mechanical standpoint of accomplishing what she wanted to do that I've ever seen ever. I used to write speeches for candidates, and I thought, and people complained that it was too long. I thought it was absolutely terrific, and it gives Republicans a guideline for a path forward. Be compassionate, be open, but also be fair, and don't apologize for being fair. We're all grown-ups here, and sometimes there are tough issues, and sometimes there are he said, she said moments, and there's no reason to be juvenile about it at any level, from dismissing the woman to also saying, well, all women should just be believed. Neither of those positions are legitimate or credible, and that's a path forward that Susan Collins laid out in her speech yesterday.
Yeah, she really did go point by point, talking from Roe v. Wade to judicial temperament, going down every point in what was a 45-minute speech at this point. Right. Michael, I want to ask you, what is the message to men when it comes to sexual assault with this? Because we know Judge Kavanaugh fought this aggressively, fought it fiercely, and he came out strong. So is the message, fight it? You're going to survive?
I don't know. This is such an unusual circumstance. I think we're better at adjudicating cases where it truly is kind of a he said, she said, where there was an encounter and both people come away with a different view of the account. Remember, this is a case we had somebody who said it absolutely happened, and I'm 100% sure it's Judge Kavanaugh. And the Kavanaugh says, I'm absolutely sure it wasn't me, and there was no corroborating evidence. You couldn't go to a single witness who could confirm or back up Dr. Ford's story. And so you really were left in this, polarized. It was just as polarized as our politics. There was no on one hand, on the other, and that was very, very tough. So I don't know that this is a case. If you're a man and you're looking for someone to rally around you because you're an abusive jerk and you think people are going to be okay with it, that was not this case did not work for you on that message at all. I think what it reminds people is, number one, take these accusations seriously, and number two, if you're a woman, people are ready to listen. They really are. Bring your evidence when it happens. Bring your story when it happens so that people can stand around you. I think it is really an unfair argument from Democrats that somehow women have been dismissed in this process. It would be very hard for someone to show me evidence to back up that case about this specific tale of Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh.
I want to bring in Molly Hooper, who's on Capitol Hill at this point. Molly, you had mentioned earlier sort of the procedures now and going forward. We're expecting a press conference from Mitch McConnell. Give us a sense of what you're hearing and seeing.
Well, that's what I am hearing. And earlier today, if you want to talk about conservative women who are fired up, this is, again, one of the things that after that Thursday hearing when I was over on the House side, following the hearing, running into some of my sources, anti-Trumpers, pro-Trumpers, the one thing that united them was that Kavanaugh was treated unfairly. They brought up a lot of points that I wouldn't have necessarily anticipated them to do. And this one issue actually, if anything, unified Republicans. And Lindsey Graham, of all people, one of the president's chief critics, said that this issue has unified Republicans more than any since Trump has been president. And it's not the he said, she said. It's the way that Judge Kavanaugh has been treated, or the way that both Dr. Ford and Kavanaugh have been treated in this process. And so,
Okay, great.
Mitch
Sorry, I'd love to
McConnell told
stay.
us earlier. Well, but Mitch McConnell said earlier, this is like a shot of adrenaline for us, and expect Republicans to keep this issue out there, calling this a, quote, shameless smear campaign by Democrats, and it's going to rev up Republicans. From what I understand, it's already revving them.
Yeah, we can see that. Molly, I want to thank you. I also want to thank Michael Graham, who you just heard a second ago. He's got to actually head out. He's been with us all day. But we do have Lynda Tran and Leslie Sanchez. Lynda, I want to let both of you, Lynda and Leslie, weigh in on what Michael Graham was saying earlier.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And let me just say, I think Michael Graham is a very intelligent human being. I enjoy having these conversations with him, but I have never taken more issue with any commentary he has offered more than in this particular moment. The idea that likening somebody who suffered sexual assault with the accused as both as victims shows you how unfair this entire situation has been. It's not he said, she said. You can't say that you believe Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and then in the next breath say, but she's confused. You either believe her or you don't. And when she said that she was 100% certain that it was Brett Kavanaugh that assaulted her, that should have meant something. I mean, even the way that hearing was carried out, the fact that they had to bring in a female prosecutor whom they referred to as a female assistant because they weren't brave enough to confront and speak to her themselves. And that means all of the GOP men who were sitting on that committee, that tells you that they were very worried. They wanted to set this up so that it was, the optics were appealing to them. And then when you get to the point where they called for an FBI investigation that did not even question the accuser or the accused, and you're hearing all of these stories, there was sworn testimony that was offered just within the last 24 hours from a friend of Christine Blasey Ford who said that he had spoken to her in 2016. She told him about Brett Kavanaugh by name at the time. There are all these people who are coming forward saying they tried to reach out to the FBI, and their information, their evidence wasn't taken into account. And so there's no way you could possibly believe that the way that the investigation or the hearing was carried out was fair to Dr. Blasey Ford. And at the end of the day, you had a woman whose life was irreparably turned upside down because of the experience that she had. She's lived with it for decades, and now she can't even live in her own home. Her name is out there, and she is a piece of history that you know she doesn't want to have to be part of. And you've got a guy who's going to be on the Supreme Court, somebody who, even if you set aside whether or not you believe Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, even if you set that aside, exhibited temperament that is so unbefitting of a Supreme Court justice, it is detrimental to the nation writ large. I mean, it's just such a horrible moment for every American in this country. It has nothing to do with party.
Leslie, you know, to Lynda's point, a lot of women have felt like this was a moment that we hoped would lead to something more, and it didn't. But, you know, we had, unfortunately, Michael had to leave. But, you know, Michael's point was also that in this system, we allowed her to be heard. You might not agree with the FBI investigation. You might not feel like it was thorough enough, but she was allowed in a very public, highly rated, I will say. Many people tuned in to watch the testimony on both sides. But how do we move past this? In sexual assault, it's always he said versus she said, with very little evidence or information to corroborate either side.
No, it's so difficult, but Rena, first thing I have to do is say what she said. Yes, I agree. So what Lynda said, there's so much of that we agree on, not as women, not as political operatives, but fundamentally in fairness. And fairness becomes the big issue here. So was it fair to bring Dr. Ford? It was appropriate. Was it fair to call her the female special prosecutor? She's a prosecutor. I mean, we could go on and on about these little slights and kind of what the judiciary had to do. But yes, I think that the problem is that, and I'm going to say that politically, the Democrats overplayed this accusation and they piled on, and you had all of these other accusations, some so outlandish that it sounded very much like you were bullying and piling on Brett Kavanaugh. And that's what activated conservative women in the way you haven't seen since the Equal Rights Amendment, when they were fighting against the feminist movement, and it really, for the first time, created a conservative women's coalition, a movement for us. That's what this did. But the problem is we have weaponized sexual assault in a way to suit our own means. And the president did that when he was mocking Dr. Ford at a political rally. It just minimizes and trivializes what we should be mature enough to have an important conversation about. And I think that's where we want to see the Senate go. I think you will see it with more women elected, regardless of party. Women are known as elected officials to be people to reach across the aisle, to look for different alternatives in different ways. Look at the Collins-Murkowski as a great example of that. Two women from the same party come to a different conclusion. Yes, they have different constituencies, but they're willing to take that bullet, so to speak, whether it's bucking their party, challenging the party, or falling in line with leadership. And that's where this is going to go. But again, the ripple effect for young girls, for candidates, and for parties will be felt for at least a generation.
I have a feeling you and I, we will all three be talking about this on this very channel for weeks and months to come.
For a generation.
For a generation. I don't know that I can sit in the seat for a generation, but Leslie Sanchez and Lynda Tran, I want to thank you both very much for joining us.